Porčić, Mihailo Radinović, and Alexandra Jovanic, measuring the profile syntax as a cultural silent aspect of vessel form. Marko, please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Marko Porčić, and I come from the University of Belgrade, so I'm a sort of home team player. And I'm going to present this piece of methodological research that I did with my co-authors, Mihailo Radinović and Alexandra Jovanic. Before I start, I would like to thank Jasna for drawing our attention to the subject of this year's conference, because it turned out that we have a perfect match for the topic, which is how to define and discover types based on a particular aspect of a vessel form that we call vessel syntax. So, to start,
the other one, the other arrow that goes.
Let's try with space. No, it's stuck a bit. Okay. It works. So, types. The old debate, the unresolved debate in archaeology, is whether types are real or whether they should be real or constructed. It is most famously exemplified by the debate between two American archaeologists, Albert Spalding and James Ford, who argued for these opposite viewpoints, whether types are something that is out there that should be discovered, or the types are something that is arbitrary, that has to be constructed and used for some purpose to measure time, to measure cultural interaction, and so on. And in our view, there is no single correct answer to this question. It depends upon the perspective. And our perspective here that we're going to take comes from the cultural transmission theory, which says that if pottery is something that is copied, that is learned in the context of social learning, and there must be something, an idea that is transmitted, learned, which goes from one potter to another, meme, if you call it, which has to be, in a sense, real. So we take this position in our research here, so that there is something to there is something real about the type that we need to measure and discover. Now, the question is how to do it. How do you get into the heads of people who are long gone? How to reconstruct and define these emic types? Now, we accepted a framework formulated by Dwight Reed in his perhaps the best book on artifact classification, and the name of the book is the same, Artifact Classification in Archaeology. And his position is that the aspects of material culture which are most likely to carry this information about the emic are qualitative attributes of objects. And we assumed, and you'll see that this assumption is not so far from reality, that form or shape of a pot is something that can be treated as a qualitative aspect. Of course, the problem is how to quantify this qualitative aspect and measure it. So when we talk about vessel shape or vessel form, we distinguish two aspects. One of them is proportions, which is simply the ratio of metric variables. So we can speak of relatively wide, relatively narrow vessels. And the second one is the one that we focus on, is what we call vessel syntax. It basically tells you how the profile of the vessel curve, it consists of segments. These segments may be concave, convex, rising and falling, and a particular sequence of these segments with different characteristics, concave, convex, rising, falling, is something which makes the syntax of a vessel. And you can see it illustrated here. So you divide a vessel into the vessel curve, profile curve into segments. You see that they are different. Some of them are convex, some are concave, rising, falling. And when you put this sequence in particular order, right, you have a sequence, you call this is the syntax of this particular vessel. Okay, so far, so good. How do we know that this aspect, the syntactical aspect of the vessel form is relevant and culturally salient? Well, we don't know for sure, but we need this.
It's me.
Okay, simple classification experiment. We presented this, sorry. You can see here, these are 4 types of vessels. There are 4 syntactical types. These types, the specimens within a type all have the same syntax, but different proportion and size. But you can easily recognize that these are, 4 types when it comes to the vessel, the syntax of the vessel. So we randomized their order and showed the outlines to students. And we asked students, how many types do you see? And classify these vessels into types. And most of them classified these vessels into the original types, the types that because we made, these are virtual vessels, we made 4 types and then just made variations of each of the type. So it does make sense. This is not a rigorous test, of course, but it shows that syntax seems to be the main driver of type recognition and classification for students and presumably for potters, but this is something that has to be tested. So, how do we go on with this knowledge to analyze the actual pots? Well, when you have a lot of pots, I'm not a pottery specialist, so you're going to empathize with this more than I do. It has a lot of work to do a classification. Of course, you can do it visually. You can define syntactical type visually, but if you have hundreds or thousands of pots, it's going to be very slow. So you're probably going to opt for some geometric morphometric technique that you can simply scan those profiles and then apply the method and statistics and get the output. So we tried 2 standard methods on these virtual pots to see if we are going to get a good classification in terms of these syntactical types that we can easily recognize visually. So the first one is based on pseudo landmarks. What you do is you measure distances of the points along the vessel profile, distances from the axis of symmetry, and then you apply some multivariate statistics. It's usually the principal component analysis. And this is what you get when you plot the results on this 2-dimensional PCA plot. It's not very good. We're not getting a perfect separation of types. Types are color-coded, and you can see a lot of mixing. So this technique is primarily separating vessels according to their proportion. You can see relatively wide vessels here, relatively narrow vessels there, but it's not separating them in regard to their syntax. Next, we apply the elliptical Fourier analysis. This is perhaps it has become a bit of a standard today, as far as I could see from the papers. It's a very sophisticated technique. It does a bit better than the pseudo landmark approach, but still, you can see there is overlap. These syntactical types are not well separated on this graph as well. So, can we do better than this? And this is where our contribution is, we hope. How do we quantify how do we isolate only the profile syntax from this quantitative data on a vessel profile? Well, we start with this simple high school mathematics, that information about the shape of the curve is contained in its derivatives, specifically in the sign of the first derivative and the sign of the second derivative of the profile curve. And when you look at it, so these segments, when you divide the vessel into segments, these are all curves, and the signs of the first and the second derivative is sufficient to describe the general shape of this curve. So you can see this is how it looks like when it's increasing and convex, increasing and concave. So you can fit, for any vessel, you can fit the segment into one of these 6 types according to the curvature and the first derivative of the curve. So we did the same thing with a pseudo landmark approach, but in this case we did not apply to the row profile curves, but to the first and second derivative of the row profile curve. So it's exactly the same method, the same statistics, but not applied on the curve itself, but on its derivatives. And the result is now much, much better. It's actually perfect because you get a perfect separation in this plot of these different vessels which have the same syntax. These are the four syntactical types. They're perfectly separated on this plot. And now we wanted to take this a step further, because this is all what you've seen before is basically numerical taxonomy. These are all similarities and differences. You would do a cluster analysis and you will get types. But we wondered, can you make an absolute classification? Can you make a classification which does not depend on the similarities and dissimilarities and on the composition of the actual assemblage, but you can do it for each specimen independently of all other specimens. So we came up with this, and it's very simple, because we can characterize each of the vessel profile segments in terms of the combination of the first and second derivative. We can classify it and give it a letter code. When you put all these letter codes signifying the type of the segment according to the combination of the first and second derivative into a sequence, you get a definition of a type. It's a self-explanatory definition of a type because it tells you how the syntax of the vessel looks like. And so we applied this to these virtual vessels. These are just examples of how it's done. This is how the profile is segmented, and this is the code for each type that you get. And then we made our classification, and it looks like this. It's almost perfect, because you can see here that we have two vessels which stand as types on their own. And we originally had 4 types, we have 6 types, but it's almost perfect. To showcase this on a real world example, because we're all interested in real world pottery, not this virtual pottery, although the principle is the same, I'm also going to demonstrate how this works on the Iron Age pottery from the site of Kalakacha in Serbia. So we have these photographs of complete pots from the site Monograph, published by Predrag Nedović. And we digitized the profile outlines from these photographs. And then we applied our method of classification, and it looks like this. Now, I know that many of you are thinking, but wait a second, you classified bowls with jars. Well, not me, but the method. And it seems like a bug, but actually it's a feature, because these jars and these bowls here have the same syntax. They do not have the same size. They do not have the same proportions. But remember, the method only recognizes syntax of the vessel. And that's what it does. And this is the classification according to syntax. In real world, you would, of course, divide first the vessels by their size, or you can later analyze these syntactical types further by looking at proportions. But this shows us that it does a very good job at isolating syntax. Okay, so to wrap it up, information about the syntactical aspects of the vessel are contained in its derivatives, and standard geometric morphometric approaches are sometimes blind to this. They may fail to notice this thing, because they're not only focused on derivatives, they're looking at other things as well. So with this method, we can focus on the syntax aspect, because it's presumably empirically, amically meaningful. It may capture the actual meaning behind the idea behind the vessel. It treats it as a qualitative dimension, because you get these discrete types, and the whole syntax concept that it's a qualitative thing. It is measured quantitatively, but this is a way to translate it back into a discrete qualitative unit. And this allows us to make this sort of absolute classification of vessels where the typology of that does not depend on the composition of the sample. Now, it has limitations, because here it's implemented only for complete vessel profiles, although in theory it could be adapted to fragments. Like I said, it's completely blind to proportion, size, and specifically for the presence and absence of handles, we have to figure out how to put handles into all this. And it may be oversensitive to details, because you saw there that we had 6 types defined by our method, but we only had 4 types originally. Now, this is because there are small segments of the profile curve which are indeed different in those two vessels. Sorry. There it is. But you cannot see them with your naked eye, but the computer does see them. But you can solve this with filters. You can say if a segment is very short, well, like 1% of the entire length, just disregard it. So it can be adjusted to not to produce too many types. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Questions?
I have one question about this experiment with your students, because I was really astonished that it was so, that it did so well, the expectations, how experienced they were in archaeological typology. So
Well, that's a very good question. These were third-year students. I assume some of them were, but I did not give them specific instructions. What I wanted to do originally, but I did not have the time. I wanted to give this same test to students of other fields, not archaeologists. So that's why I'm saying it's not rigorous, because some of them perhaps had some experience with pottery classification, but from my general experience, third-year students are not experts. So, but yes, you have a good point here. It would be interesting to see how people who are outside archaeology, and this is my plan to do, actually, to give it to psychology students, art students, to see if they're good. And what would be most interesting and more realistic is to ask potters. How do they see types to see if it corresponds to some emic idea?
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I'd like to ask, you mentioned at the end that this was tested on complete vessels, right?
Yes.
So if you want to adjust it to incomplete vessels or fragments, is there a sequence that you can follow in order to limit the deviation parameter, or it's still under process?
Well, we haven't tried it on fragments, because you would have to limit, you would have to have a very clear limit for the comparability of your fragments. For example, you would have to be sure that you only have the neck of the vessel, or the lower half or the upper half. Then it would be easy to adjust, because you have comparable units when it comes to this absolute classification. But when it comes to the derivatives and this, when you don't look for types, you're just trying to plot them in a morpho space, then it would be easier to do with fragments. That's what Karasik and Smilansky did in their paper. But still, you would have to have fragments which are representing comparably the same part of vessel anatomy. We haven't got into it yet, but this is the direction that I think that this is something that has to be fulfilled. The condition that has to be fulfilled is you have fragments which are comparable anatomically between vessels. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is it very time consuming?
No, that's the whole thing. That the idea is to make to reduce the time consuming part, because if you could do this visually, because you're just looking at the geometry of the vessel, and you can do it, but you want to speed it up. It will take you hours, days, I don't know how much to do it visually. All you have to do in our implementation, we're going to publish it soon, I hope. You scan the photograph or a drawing of a complete vessel profile. You digitize it. We have a code for that. And then it takes 3 seconds for the program. We have a software that you just run it through, and it gives you the classification. So that was the idea. That's why because we had to classify a lot of vessels for some completely other unrelated research. and we were unsatisfied with the standard geometric morphometric approaches because it did not isolate the syntax, and we were specifically interested in that, and that's how we came up with the method to speed it up.
Maria?
Sorry, my voice. It's worse. How did you go to the college?
I'm almost embarrassed to say. I remember that it was very well published. I remember that it had photographs of complete vessels.
Yes, that's
So-
actually my job. You made a good.
Yeah, because I wanted a quick archaeology. My first intention was to do it in Vincha, but I could not find it in one place, photographs and drawings, and so I went for the easiest solution.
Yes,
That's the reason, to be honest.
To my knowledge, it was one of the best solutions because it's seldom do we have a chance to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Good trip.
Well, if there are no more questions, thank you, Marco. Our next speaker will be delivered by Efimia and
No.
Oh, sorry. I want to buy painted pottery from ornament typology to technological style.
Yeah, hold on.
Just-
Okay, it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this conference again, and this time in person, so it's a nice treat. And today I will be talking about painted pottery of the early Neolithic statual culture of the Central Balkans, and specifically I will be talking about painted ornaments themselves. In the archaeology of Serbia, painted pottery was usually approached to the analysis of typology and painting style, and painted ornaments were viewed as indicators of culture, as chronological parameters, and as indicators of migrations and cultural influences. And I don't want to say that there is no value in this approach to painted pottery, but today I want us to shift our focus from painted ornaments as the static visual entities to painted pottery as the reflection of specific knowledge, skill, and practices. Because pottery painting required different kinds of embodied and also technological knowledge, and these are only some that are important for our talk today. So the mastery of fine motor skills to control the brush and the paint, ability to execute ornaments on these curved vessel surfaces, understanding of pigments and their relation with the surfaces, with slips and firing conditions, and ability to conceptualize and plan those ornamental compositions. And these skills were developed through practice, through repetition and involvement in these communities of practice, where these technical knowledge and aesthetics conventions were shared, transmitted, and learned. So in this talk today, we will discuss the use of different paint color, painting techniques, and skill and care of painting. And this research is based on the analysis of painted pottery from the site of Grivac in central Serbia. And it's based only on macroscopic observations, and microscope was used only as the tool for documentation and illustration of certain phenomena. Let us begin with the paint color. In Grivac, we have this range of colors, and as you can see, the red painting highly prevails. It's followed by white, but I have to say that these shades of red, brown, and brown probably represent the use of the same pigment as the red painting, and in a moment you will see why. So these are the examples of different paint colors, and red painting is usually of thick consistency, applied in a thin layer, so you could not feel it under your fingers. And it is different from the red color used in miniature culture to paint figurines and altars. And I think it's a different pigment they use, although we don't have analysis to confirm it. These are reddish brown and brown painted pots. And these are those that made me think that it's the use of the same pigment, because the color of paint on these samples is not the same in the entire vessel, and the changes in color follows the changes in the color of slip. So where the slip is brown or yellowish, the painting is brown, and where the slip is red, the painting is red. So I think that it's the use of the same pigment, but with different firing conditions. And I have to say that this brown color is not the same brown that was used in some other sites like Starszy Grad or Pavlovec Moniszta that I also analyzed, that are a bit later, because the color on these sites is of different texture. It's thicker, of thicker consistency, and it never changes hues to these red colors. Even in pieces that are secondary burned. So I think it's the use of different pigments. And this is important because brown painting is usually attributed to the later phases of the Starsheva culture. And I think this is a warning that we cannot use only the color of paint as an indicator, that we have to consider the use of different pigments. And I think that some characteristics could be deferred or even only based on macroscopic observations, but we do need analysis to confirm how they made these pigments. So white painting differs in hues from pure white to yellowish hues, and it's usually of thick consistency. Sometimes it's applied in a thicker layer that you could feel under your fingers. And where the original surface of the paint is not preserved, it has a powdery texture. Black pigment or black paint is registered only on 3 samples and differs from this dark gray, greenish to pure black. And because we have only 3 samples, I think that we cannot speak about some regular practice and use of this paint, but rather about some kind of experimentation or mistake in the use of raw materials. And the same is true for this purple, one sample of purple painting. So now we will move to the painting techniques. In Grivac, pottery was painted in 5 different techniques: a linear, droplet, a tremolo, combination of painting and channeling, and negative painting. And in addition to producing these different visual effects, these painting techniques required use of different brushes, different gestures of movement, and different conceptualization or planning of the ornament. The most prevailing is this linear painting, and it is done by linear brush strokes across the vessel surface. Those are usually very thin lines done probably with fine brushes that could look something like this. And as you saw, so we will come back, it is done in all paint colors. And on these samples, you can see these very fine lines that probably represent the traces of the brush bristles. Drop or droplet painting did not require these linear brush strokes, but relied on repeated dabbing of the tip of the brush on making these little dots. So it didn't involve dripping of paint, but the contact of the brush with the surface. And by grouping of these dots, they formed these ornaments. And it's always done in white painting. On some samples, drop painting was combined with linear painting to get these so-called olive branch motifs. And on this sample, we have something different. It's done by, as you can see here, first they painted these white dots, and After that, a potter connected them with a line that moved across them. Tremolo painting refers to these motifs with these wavy lines that have almost like expressionistic quality, and it is registered only on 4 specimens, and it is always done in red color. So, but the red color here, red paint here, is a bit more diluted, and there the paint is smeared, and the edges of the lines are not very clear. So, and on some of them, these waves of adjacent lines follow each other, like also like here. So maybe this was done by dragging the paint of these lines with some kind of tool that made these smudges. But we have to test this with the experiment to see if it could be like something like this. On one sample, it's the interesting combination between 2 techniques, so channeling and painting, where these deep channels were filled with white paint. But we have very small fragment, and we don't know how the motif looked. On one vessel, negative painting was applied, and in Grivas, this is also the only vessel with painted spiral ornament. And this design required different conceptualization and different planning compared to other painting techniques, because here the design was not executed by painting the motif itself, but rather by applying this red color to the surrounding negative space. So the motif could emerge from the background, from the color of slip. And judging by the sequence of brushstrokes, this particular potter first outlined these contours of spirals, and then approached to coloring the background. And this example of negative painting shows that Neolithic potters had this grasp of figure-ground relationship and of negative space. But because we have only one sample, I cannot think that we can talk about some usual practice, but again, some kind of experimentation with this technique. So I want us to linger a bit longer on this vessel, because there is a very interesting combination of features that I didn't register anywhere else. So we have this negative painting that is very rare. And we have a red paint that is usually attributed to the earliest phases of the early Neolithic. And we have this large spiral motif that is usually connected with the latest phases of the statial culture. So if we approach this and considered only the ornament itself, we could probably attribute it to the later phases of the statial culture. But if we consider all of these segments, then the chronological attribution becomes less straightforward. So I think that it's another warning that we have to consider all of these elements. And now we'll move to the skill and care of painting. It is assessed through these parameters, but I couldn't measure all the parameters on all the vessels. And usually vessels in Grivas were painted with high skill and high care. And on them, the lines are regular and with sharp edges, and the boundaries of elements of the design were carefully respected. And in contrast, on these unskillfully painted vessels, we have uneven lines with paint blotches and smeared paint. And these suggest the unsteadiness of hand, frequent repetition or retouching of one line, and also different variations of the pressure of the brush against the surface, and all indicates to less skillful pottery painters, how to call them. So all in all, in Grivats, we have a rather stable community of practice with highly skillful potters, but also we have evidence of learning and gradual learning of the skill. And to conclude, I think that typology remains important analytical tool, but that painted pottery could not be understood only through the lens of these ornamental types or chronological schemes, that we need to consider all other aspects of pottery, and Grivats material demonstrated that paint color and motifs could not neatly correspond to our previously arranged chronological phases. And instead, painted ornaments should be considered as traces of technological choices, experimentation, communities of practice. And in this way, we get this more dynamic understanding of Neolithic pottery, one that moves us beyond this static classification of typology toward understanding and reconstruction of technological and social practices. And at the end, I would like to invite you to visit the exhibition at the National Museum in Belgrade, where you can see this, see here, painted pottery from Donja Branjevina. And thank you very much for your attention.
Questions? Next, Mark.
I have a question. Perhaps a stupid question, but still I have to ask it. Were these painted motifs painted before or after the vessel expired?
Okay, for this particular assemblage, I think that it was before. I'm more certain with the material from Pavlovac in Starčevo because I have a really nice traces of polishing above the paint colors. So you can see the traces. I have this thing, but maybe I have the photographs. So I can see the traces of polishing that was done after the painting. But in Grivats, I'm not that sure because I didn't see those traces, but I think it was done before firing.
So these pigments could withstand the heat and not.
Yes, but especially that we saw the red pigment that changes hue. So I think it's the white painting is something that because it appears different and it's sometimes in relief. Yes. So and the polishing marks are not that clear. So that could be, but I think that all of them were done before.
And one more question. You said that the color of what we usually call the red is not the same red for the late specimens and early specimens. Can you do you have a way to standardize that color with Munsell so that we can recognize that easily, or is it just a detail? How easy is to recognize this difference?
Is it for brown?
Yeah,
Okay.
for brown,
Yes,
for
yes.
what we usually
Okay.
call red. It's
I
not
did-
the same.
I took Mansell and I compared my every specimen with Mansell. It was like Jasa knows you get very variable because it's those are earth pigments and with different firing or you can get different slightly different hues.
Yes, well,
But I think that this from Grivats compared to Starčevo and Pavlovac, you can see the difference. And I can find the Mansell because I think that these brown from Grivats are more reddish hues than, and these are like more dark brown.
okay,
So I think that there
that's
is a
going to be
difference.
very useful for.
Yes, I have I didn't put them here, but I have all the Mansell codes. Yeah.
Question, thank you. Seeing all these techniques and the motives, can you apply them directly on material for different sites and see some regularity regarding the site, the spatial framework, also the chronological one?
There is a relationship between paint color and the technique, or you think?
No, just is there any difference, for example, between rivets and disciplinary field, this
Yes.
spatial framework? Is there any difference here on any regularity you can find regarding these applying techniques?
Okay, I analyzed 3 sites in 4, including Pavlov's Shukar, and assemblages are generally small. So it is very difficult to get some kind of statistically significant relationship between sites, or we have just a few sites with big assemblages. Between these, there are very differences, especially in in paint color and in technique. I think rivets is the most variable. It has the most different paint colors and different painting techniques. While, for example, in Pavlovac, there is almost every pot was painted with this dark brown color. And there is white painting, but I think that we have to reconsider this white because there are some changes in the color and some something that indicates to me that maybe it's not white paint. We have different, I didn't, so first I thought to present all 3 sides, but it was too much. So there are changes of this white color and some kind of dark brown layer above it. So I don't know if it's actually the white.
Some local production. Something.
There are some,
or maybe more widespread.
yeah, we'll see. It's I can see some chronological differences, but I don't know now how to explain them. But according to this, it seems that we have like a narrowing of techniques and motives and everything as the time goes by. So at the beginning, it's my impression for now that we have a lot of experimentation and then we get this like narrowing. I don't know if I'm correct.
May I add something because I worked on the material from the other side of Pavlovac, and completely independently Olga worked with this side and I on the 4th one, and we got almost the same results. So it was very good for both of us because we have similar results. And I think this smeared tremolo lines are very important because they appear on grivats and they also appear near brani.
Yes.
In small quantities, but they indicate some experimentation that occurred probably independently even because these sites are not very close to each other. So we deal here with I would say some with a period of high experimentation where painters had a freedom to express themselves. So this is very interesting, but this red paint did not last.
No.
So something happened.
Yes, I don't know why. And then we have in Vincha, but it's like different pigments,
Yes, it's
completely different.
I'm afraid we have to move on, so maybe we continue the discussion during the coffee break. Next speaker is Efimia Angeli with a paper on typology between cognition and practice, reconsidering the notion of surround classifications through the Neolithic assemblage of Halai Central Greece.
Second. Just a second, excuse me.
Stop screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. No.
Maybe from stop share.
Stop share, then we'll stop share the whole Zoom. Just a sec. Show control.
No, mis. Пrzy. До лавки до